Howdy guys, Rusty here, and this is the first Q&A video for Impact Dynamics. Probably should have done these years ago. Anyway, I get a lot of questions through Impact Dynamics, the podcasts, and PRS, and through a few other mediums. And the ones that are really relevant to the wider audience, thought we'd put into a video format. So here we go with a number of questions. If you want a question answered, hit us up through Facebook, Instagram, all those sort of things, and we will do our best to put it into the next episode. While you're here, hit subscribe, hit like, all those sort of things. Let's see if we can build this channel up. If you are not yet a Patreon supporter, check that out. If you're in a position to do so, we'd love to have you on board. Anyway, let's get into it. Matt Stevens says, looking at best budget setup secondhand for those that can't afford bling, but still want to punch out to comp distances. All right, Matt, first up, I'm going to assume that you're talking PRS comps because there would be lots of different comps, lots of different distances. So within those parameters of a PRS match, PRS matches within Australia historically have commonly been out to about 600 metres, although there has been a match to 900 and potentially could be more at that distance and further. Second-hand setups. Do you know what? If you're looking to do this on a budget, I probably wouldn't go second-hand. What you can get from, say, a Hauer 1500 for not a lot of money in a heavy barrel, basic sort of get up, can be quite cheap. Let's look this up now. We'll go to one of the bigger websites for guns in the country, and let's look up Hauer. Let's say Creedmoor. It's a very sensible caliber for this sort of thing from a factory gun. You can get a Hauer Varmint Creedmoor barreled action for under $550. Now you could partner that with a really cheap stock for less than $100. You would have a brand new capable gun, not talking about scopes and such, but just the rifle itself, for under $650. I did a little bit of used gun looking before, and I can't find anything that is cheaper than that would be, there's significantly cheaper than that would be better. Like there's a lot of tickers there that you could grab, but you're talking $1,000 plus for like a heavy barrel sort of option. So I really think a brand new Hauer is probably the way to go. If you are looking at trying to get a second-hand but a higher tier gun, so spending a couple of $1,000s to try and get something that's pushing 3+, if the chassis and the action add up, like retail prices on those two things, and let's say the trigger as well, if the retail prices on those three things add up to like a substantial difference to what you're paying for it, that's what base your value on. Assume the barrel is shot out, because I've heard of and seen plenty of barrels that go on to use guns, having said there's 200 rounds on them, and they probably missed a zero. There's at least 2,000 plus rounds on them. So I would take the price of the chassis, the action, and the trigger. If it's a good deal on those three things, fantastic, and expect to buy a new barrel. If you don't, then fantastic, even better savings. But that's what I'd be based on. But budget, trying to keep it as cheap as you can, Hauer 1500 is hard to beat on that price point. Greg Hamilton asks, which shooters do I role model and why? Greg, I'll leave it with the overseas crew because there's a number of guys here that I really look up to and respect. But let's throw it overseas. Three names come to mind, actually. Regina Milkovic, John Pinch, and Paul Reed, and for very different reasons. Regina, having been fortunate enough to interview her and spend some time with her, she is very honest. She is super supportive, and she's just real. She is not afraid to talk about the times it's gone terribly wrong for her. She is a very accomplished and good shooter. She has done very well, and particularly when she's focused, she can shoot extremely well. Extremely well. And when she's not, she will admit to it as well, which I respect that. John Pinch, only met John once, but have spoken to him a couple of times. Absolute gentleman, absolute, very humble, very, very unassuming. Just seems to go about his business, but very exceptional shooter. Very much knows what he's doing, and I just like the way he approaches it, and very supportive of other shooters and other people. And Paul Reed, fortunate enough to spend a reasonable amount of time with Paul. Brutally honest, which some people may not like, but brutally honest, which is really, really refreshing. He will tell you exactly what's wrong, what you're doing wrong, what the problem is, etc. And when you're doing something right, he will tell you exactly what he likes about it to keep it up, and is so supportive of. It's probably a common theme, isn't it, with the shooters that I like? Very supportive of new shooters, of existing shooters, of the sport overall, and Paul's very happy to criticise, but he criticises out of love because he sees the problem and identifies it. He keeps things very simple as well. He just says, I do this and this works, and away you go. Doesn't super complicate things, which is, again, very refreshing and nice to see. You notice I haven't really spoken about their actual shooting a huge amount. To me, I want to role model myself on people's qualities. The shooting ability, the skill level varies, I guess, over, from month to month. You get better and you can drop off a bit and all that sort of gear. It can come and go. You can improve it with practice and determination, and to some degree raw talent as well. But those other qualities are there and solid, and that's what I really look forward to. Having said that, I haven't shot a lot of matches recently. I'm starting to shoot a lot more now at the club, and I intend to shoot one this year on the PRS circuit. So perhaps the shooting aspect, I'll become more familiar with, what styles of shooters I really like, and the styles that I reflect, the styles that I'd like to replicate. But from a community aspect, which is really what I've been involved with, and from looking at how we can grow the number of shooters we have and the people involved, those three shooters, Paul Reed, Regina Milkovic, and John Pinch, massive respect for all three of those. Brendan Michael asks, is the New South Wales match on the cards for 2020? Brendan, I'm going to assume that that's based on a PRS match, but let me give you a little bit of an update on what's happening PRS overall in New South Wales. Currently, there is a club that has been given approval to exist as a club, but they are waiting on approval for the discipline that they have submitted, which I guess is very, very close, virtually based on PRS rules. That is currently being assessed, and hopefully, if that goes through, they've got their club approval, they can start running local matches. One of the big things from a PRS point of view that we've been keen to see is that the areas where there's a local club that can either look to develop local matches or is developing local matches, that's a really good long-term way of building the sport. You can come into an area with the PRS and rock up, shoot a match, and then put some money into the town and help the club out, and then move on to something else. And then we don't hear from that club for a year, which is fine. It's no big deal. But what's brilliant is the clubs that are then 3 weeks later, they're shooting a club match. And then 1 month later or 2 months later, or whatever works out to, they're doing this regular community building, sport building sort of process. PRS has drifted more towards wanting to do that long term than just finding a range, putting an event on. And so with New South Wales, with this club starting, once they are up and running, they're well geared up. The guys involved know what they're doing from running a match point of view, and they've shot plenty of matches, and there's a lot of support for it. They've even got sponsors who are keen and waiting, ready to rock and roll for that match. So if that all goes through, when it all goes through, then a PRS match will be looked at for dates and which season it will fall into and go from there. So, in summary, 2020 PRS match in New South Wales, I don't know at this stage. Philip Sarong asks, thoughts on IPAs? Now, for those who don't know, I am also on a different podcast called Two Beers, One Chat. That features Dave. Dave works for Beretta. He's sponsored shooter for Burris. He's a Canadian. Do with that what you wish. And he's been on the PRS circuit the last couple of years. Dave and I share a fascination with beer. Many of you do, but Dave specifically has always been into his craft beers. And I guess started the podcast not really knowing heaps or loving craft beer, and I've become much more susceptible to it these days. So, Philip's question on IPAs is not out of the ordinary. I'm on record for not loving IPAs. I'm not a big fan of heaps of hops. But that is still true, however things are changing or progressing, let's say. I'm starting to get into New England IPAs. They're very, the hazy sort of thing. I like them. But I guess my first preference is sours in summer and porters in winter. Anyway, back onto the shooting. Kieran asks, out of all the support bags on the market, if you could only choose one bag, what would you choose and why? And why questions? I just want justification. Always justification with you, Kieran, isn't it? All right. One bag to rule them all. I don't know. I don't know. I mentioned before that I've been out of shooting matches, been more involved with running them for a number of years. And so I haven't got the plethora of bags and been using them on a regular basis, which I think is what you need to do to really be able to say which bag is going to perform the best. But I'll give it a crack anyway. Going back a few years, I bought the Game Changer, basically just after it had come out, and that thing was sensational. Still is. Now I have now a bright pink one, which is somehow ended up with that, and that is probably my most commonly used bags. It's not the ideal bag, I don't think, but let's flick this question to another 6 months, when by then I probably should have shot 10 comps or so. And I'll endeavour to get particularly one of the pint-size ones. I've also got a solo sack from SAP, a couple of other things like that I wouldn't mind putting into practice and really seeing which one is going to work well for my style of shooting, because yours could be different. Trav Harris, Travis Shooting Adventures, check him out. Can Sean, this is Sean from STS Targets, can Sean shoot on a 90-degree cant? Yeah, that's good. Well done, Travi. That's referencing an old video. In fact, I'll play it for you. Let's just play this and watch this. All right, so Sean this stage had shooting 90 degrees and also shooting straight. So there was a first beep. Cover up the swearing. That seems to be common and again. If you haven't practiced this, it's hard to get in position. Don't reckon he got that. Impact. He got that one. Yeah. I think he just threw that mag a long way. Oh, nice catch, Sean. Well done. All right, now there's a target at 1100 or something along those lines. Such an uncomfortable position. And timeout.
No. Not a bad effort, man. Not a bad effort.
Anyway, so that was that video, and my favourite part, I guess, was this comment that we had as on YouTube. It says it's the same for everybody. No need to act like a spoiled child. Yeah, which did make me giggle because, here's the truth, only about a third of those beeps were actually him swearing. The rest were put in for dramatic effect. It was meant to be a laugh rather than taking it overly seriously. Anyway, right. So can he shoot on a cant? I don't know. Back in the day, we used to do the 90-degree cant a little bit in matches. It's not super practical. Like, it's very rare that you'd actually be in a position to do that. It was more like an experiment or being able to show that you understand what happens to your zero when your gun is sideways, or just understanding that relationship between your scope and your barrel really, really well. It was a really good exercise in that. It only takes about 2 or 3 minutes to work out what's going on, put it on paper, shoot, work out the difference. And from there, you're good. You can duplicate your profiles in your ballistics app and set up one for 90-degree cant left or right. Yeah, they've probably gone out of fashion because they're not super practical. All right, question here from Reese, who is on a video of me shooting. That's scary. Interesting firing hand technique you've got, Rusty. Is that built for speed or comfort? Well, I mean, obviously I'm built for speed, but you know we can deal with comfort if need be. Let's bring this video up. I'll play you this video, and you'll see what's wrong with it. What's wrong with me? So you'll see here, I have a habit of using my middle finger for the trigger. Now this is born out of some competitions we used to do on the side. We used to run a public shooting range, and in between clients, we'd just grab the 22s out and just bang away with lots of rounds. And there was this one little target set up. In fact,
Don't be a bitch.
I haven't used this for a long time. This is the target setup. So this will be about 20 meters away, not very far. But the thing is with these targets, you've only got about the top centimeter to be able to hit. Otherwise they'll go down and come back up. These are subsonic loads, that's why. So you would hit the top, they'd go down 1, 2, 3, and then hit the bottom one, and they would all fire back up. So the game was to hit all 4 targets in order, so you knock all 4 down. If they didn't go down, they didn't count, you'd have to shoot it again. You only had about that much on the top of the target, as I said, and so it had to be a relatively accurate shot, but it was only 20 meters, so you could still do it pretty quickly. I don't know how I ended up moving to that finger, but what it allowed was that these 2 fingers could hold the bolt. Now with a 22, you haven't got as much travel, so holding that bolt, you can basically tap the trigger, slide it back in, tap it again, etc., etc. And you could do that really quickly, and we were talking like sub 4 seconds, sort of 3. I'm trying to remember what they were, but anyway, they were 3 or less seconds to get the 4 shots off on 4 different targets. It was pretty quick, and the only way I could achieve it was by doing that. That's carried through to current day competitions, which works fine in rimfire. I don't know how well it works in the centerfire matches. I haven't been consistent enough in monitoring the results. That's something I need to do. So I will go out and I will shoot maybe a particular course, including paper, some groups, and some distance targets, and see if my results vary using standard trigger finger, using this trigger finger. I'll see if it's any quicker, or if it's any better, or if it makes no difference, or if it's worse. And I'm open to the fact that it could definitely be worse, because the big thing is the action length, the stroke there, and where the bolt sits is a very different place to what happens on a CZ22, and that's really what that position was built around. However, we did that many, probably tens of thousands of rounds, that that became my default. So that's how I shoot, rightly or wrongly. Never put that into any of the training courses I used to run, because I was never convinced that it was a good standard advice for all situations. But it does come out on videos when I shoot. Sorry to annoy you again, no dramas, but I have an old 223 that I'm using as a practice rifle to get used to longer range and cheap ammo. But it's a 1 in 12 twist, so I can only shoot 55 grains out of it. How far should be acceptable to shoot steel at? Well, how far with a 55 grainer? Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel was on a 5-day intensive course with Impact Dynamics a number of years ago. It was all about long range shooting, and Daniel was running a pretty standard gun. I think it was a Remington 5R in 223. She might not have been a 5R. Anyway, whatever it was a 1 in 12 twist rate as well. He had 55 grain Sierra Match King factory ammo. Daniel was hitting a target fairly regularly at 800 metres with his 55 grainers through a 1 in 12 until the wind picked up. That messed things up pretty well. So 800 metres on that day in those conditions was pretty good. And he was a good shooter. He wrote everything down, listened to every single thing that was said, wrote it all down. It all sunk in, would spend the nights reviewing the notes and details like that. Very detailed orientated guy. And it paid off for him as well. His results were impeccable for a 223. I'm not going to say you couldn't hit further than 800 metres. I certainly believe you can. I've heard of stories of people doing it. Probably have seen it done. I don't know. Didn't pay attention. You don't stack things in your favour when you're going to choose a 55 grainer and run it in a 1 in 12. But if that's what you've got, you can definitely learn heaps from it. I'd put the target at a distance that with your skill level and your gun, you are rewarded when you do a good shot and you're punished when you make a mistake. So if that is currently for your skill level, 400 metres on a gong this size, then fantastic. Cool. When everything lines up, you do everything right, you're hitting your target, and then if you twist a little bit, you get your wind call wrong and you're missing, perfect, because then you can learn from those things. Maybe increase the size of your target a little bit more initially, and then reduce it or have 2 or 3 targets in descending sizes. All those things are options. You can go further with your, than 400 metres, but just look at whether you're getting hits. Getting hits is telling you that what you're doing is good. If you're hitting everything, that's too easy for you. That's it. Episode 1 of the Q&A. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully something was useful to you. If not, jump on, ask a question, and let's get an answer for you. Make sure to subscribe, hit like, put a comment comment down below with your next question for the next Q&A. And you can hit us up on Patreon if that's your sort of thing to do. Really appreciate the support. We have some Patreon supporters who are involved. You'll see their names at the end of this. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.